Good evening. Thank you for joining Muncie Pride. This evening we are hosting part 3 of Queer Conversations, and tonight we'll be discussing non-binary identities.
My name is Cam Winter. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I came to realize my non-binary identity as an undergrad at Ball State. About my freshman year, I participated in a group called Spectrum, which is an LGBT group on campus. Settled upon non-binary for myself.
I'm Dallas Sanford. I use they, them pronouns. And my, coming to non-binary as my label is non-traditional, I guess. I didn't have the college experience right out of high school, so I had to have other ways to find a community and a consciousness. So after high school, I started doing drag performance, and that led me into a bunch of different opportunities with trans people working and performing with. Later on, I moved to South Carolina. Oh, sorry, I was born in Alabama, by the way. I moved to South Carolina and kind of lived in this frozen state in the military for a while. And then not much personal growth happened, honestly. I had some friends back in South Carolina that challenged me a lot as far as artistic endeavors went. And I guess when you're just around a lot of artsy people, they tend to think about things differently. So it made me start questioning my link to gay as a label and what that means for gender identity as well, because I guess I don't really identify with a typical masculine gay stereotype. So I've always been kind of feminine even through high school. So God, this is such a ramble. Through androgyny, through art, and through, I guess, a non-traditional upbringing through drag, I came to the conclusion that I was trans, but I didn't want to transition, so what does that mean for me? And I settled on non-binary because I like the gray area in the spectrum, I guess.
All right. My name is C.S. Hendershot, and I use they, them pronouns. I suppose I had originally came out as gay when I was 16. And at the time, I didn't even know what it meant to be transgender, and I absolutely had no idea that there were other identities out there. And so I felt this sense of I didn't feel comfortable in feminine clothing. I didn't feel comfortable presenting as a woman as I was aging. And I started to notice around my senior year of high school that I was interested in presenting more androgynous, but I still didn't quite understand what it meant for me. And I was still very shy about it. And really, I had that college experience similar to Cam, where one day I had a friend just ask me, hey, do you want to go to Spectrum with me? And I went to Spectrum, and suddenly, it was just as if a door opened, and I learned a lot about queer identities. And during that semester of my freshman year, I remember being in an English class, and I actually ended up writing an autoethnography. And in that paper, I basically came out, even though I didn't quite have the term just yet. And slowly, as I kind of learned over the course of 7 years, pretty much, I slowly figured out this is the term that fits me, and that was non-binary. And I think it was year 7, I decided that I wanted to change my name. I didn't like my name at the time because it presented more feminine. And I decided that I wanted people to start using they, them pronouns for me.
Right. And I'm Justice Ware. I go by either they, them, or he, him. My discovery probably actually happened last year, so pretty recent for me. I grew up in a very, I don't want to say redneck, but very right-leaning town that's very, you have to stay in a box, obviously, and my dad is a pastor, so then on top of that, I was very constricted growing up, but I always liked androgyny a lot, you know. I have a sister, I'd like to wear her clothes sometimes, because if I look good, I look good. But I never really know what that meant in terms of identity. Growing up, I was very sheltered, so I didn't even know that there was anything other than like male and female. And then everywhere I'd go, I'd be labeled just like, that must mean you're gay. And I personally identify as just queer. I like female, just female, so I don't know exactly where that is. Non-binary, I'm still learning. But when I got to high school, I think I was able to adventure more with androgyny, wearing different kinds of clothes, what I could buy, especially because I had a job and I can buy my own clothes and buy my own jewelry, do whatever I want. And then when I got to college, kind of the same as you two, I didn't go to Spectrum, although I met a lot of different people who opened up my mind about a lot of different things and made me want to learn a lot more. And then I got out of college, taking a break, and so last year, which would have been my senior year, I was actually just sitting and watching a stand-up with my friends, Alana Glazer's stand-up, and she was talking about how every now and then she feels that her gender fluctuates a lot. And she said, sometimes today I'll feel like 60% female, 40% male. And in that moment I was just thinking, well, today I'm feeling 80% female and 20% male. And so at that moment I realized, hey, I think maybe I should get outside of the black and white here. And while I am still learning, I decided to just go into non-binary because that's what I know right now.
I think having an identity, like you said, validates what you're feeling and who you are and how you're presenting to others. I think that's why it's important, really.
I would say you can think of cisgender as if you were, let's say, assigned female at birth and you go through and live your daily life identifying as a female and not questioning it, embracing it. That is how I would perceive cisgender as being defined.
Non-binary, I mean, it's a spectrum and it's very broad. And to me, non-binary is like you don't identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth, but you also don't assign yourself with one category or the other in the sense of male or female. But it's also it's a broad term. And so it's kind of like a mini umbrella underneath to me, and this probably gets into another question, but it's like a mini umbrella underneath an umbrella of transgender.
I also think non-binary is like it can be a rejection of the binary genders. You could also say that gets into like agender, but for people who aren't comfortable with like strict male or strict female stereotypical traits. Non-binary can be kind of like a happy medium, and you don't have to lock yourself into anything.
And there's other terms that people often will use. There's like genderqueer. A lot of people, I think at one point I actually used the term genderqueer. You mentioned agender.
Gender fluid.
And I mean, I think this has been kind of a controversy at one point, was like the alphabet soup. So like people will kind of make fun of like the term LGBTQIA, blah, 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 and they'll be like, oh, alphabet soup. And it's like, I think what's happening here is there are so many identities that you can have, and I mean, having a universal term, kind of like just LGBTQ or queer, even just queer. A lot of people will now use the term queer. At one point, it was, people didn't appreciate using that term, but the community has kind of taken that term back because it's easy and it's universal, and everyone can just say, I'm queer, and everyone can identify with that. I don't know about you all, but like, do you like the term queer?
I love it.
I like it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot of meaning specifically for the individual, specifically, but we're also, like you said, there's making it a bit more universal, just so everybody has a way of, I guess, identification for people, which is nice. But yeah, queer can be, I feel like in the community, queer can be used in so many different ways.
I mean, to me, like, and I said this before, I see transgender as a umbrella term, and so there are other umbrellas within it, and I see non-binary as an umbrella within the transgender umbrella. That's a lot of umbrellas in there, but but I also know some people who may say, I'm non-binary, but I don't identify as transgender. I don't know about you all, but...
I've gone back and forth in my thought process about it. I feel like a lot of people use non-binary as a stepping stone to eventually I'm going to transition and be a binary gender, a woman or a man. And it's kind of like bisexual people and bi-erasure.
For me personally, I think there are people that identify as non-binary that may start hormones, they may have surgery, but you don't have to. And there are people who are transgender and they may not want to have surgery or start hormones. That doesn't mean that you're not that identity. So.
I fully embrace identifying as a transgender person. I also struggled with it a lot, going back and forth, like, am I allowed to view myself under this identity because, you know, I'm not on hormones, I am not identifying as any binary gender, but eventually I came to just accept that, you know, this is just a big, weird community of people where you're not the only person struggling with what you're going through as far as like gender identities and putting yourself into these boxes, so to say. And I realized, you know, through Spectrum and meeting other people in the community that, you know, I wasn't the only non-binary person who also identified strongly as being transgender, and that kind of really even solidified things further for me because it gave me another family of people, so to speak. Because, I mean, when you're just in one niche of non-binary, you know, that's, I I keep like losing my train of thought. Yeah, loaded questions. Long story short, I fully embrace it, identifying as a transgender person, and whether other people in the community think that there's a space for non-binary people within the transgender label, it doesn't really matter, because that's who we are and that's how we identify, and it's gonna be embraced by other people down the line too.
I guess bouncing off that, I feel like there's this misconception of non-binary people having to be like the absolute gray of male and female. Whereas like if you can view gender as a spectrum between male and female, anything that isn't like a 0 or a 10 on that scale would be considered non-binary. So there's like a lot of diversity within the community, but there's also a lot of room for like more specific self-identification, but non-binary is just a general label that I think it's important to consider that labels are not for the person, they're for other people to be able to understand what they're looking at.
I guess my rationale, if you will, for identifying as a transgender person is, growing up, I struggled with, growing up as a female, and I, throughout high school, with certain friends and partners, would experiment with like name changes that were more masculine. I would present more masculinely, and no matter what I did, as far as binary genders go, I just didn't feel right either way. So, I mean, that's just my thought process is, and it always has been, I'm not identifying with either one of these binary genders. So, I mean, I guess by definition, that makes you transgender.
I mean, you're basically not identifying with the assigned gender that you were given at birth. And so therefore, you fall within that category of, I am not going to embrace this thing that was put upon me, and I'm going to deviate from that. And due to that, I mean, you fall under the category of transgender. Just because you may not start HRT, you may not go through any surgeries, doesn't mean that you're not trans.
I'll say personally, I know using they, them, because when I say non-binary, I bring it back to what I said with that stand-up of like 80%, 20%, 60%, 40%. I feel I am different by the day. So that can't always really be defined just by he or she. So if you don't know who you're talking about, you say they. And I think that's just kind of how English works in that regard. So that's also my personal thought process of it all.
I think I really like they, them because it fits within the English language. A lot of people already use they or them within their everyday lives. It's just that they are having trouble with it grammatically. But I appreciate it because it's a little bit easier for people to kind of pick up, even though I wish it was a little bit more easy for them, or that they tried harder, which is another question that might come up. But that's why I personally have geared towards using they, them pronouns.
if you were a cisgender male or female, you wouldn't want somebody approaching you and using wrong pronouns for you, or calling you by any other names that you wouldn't identify with. So it's not costing you anything, it's not harming you or anybody else to just use somebody's pronouns. It's just, in the end, it's validating them and allowing them to feel respected.
It's really human decency. Just be polite. I go by they, them. You go by he or she. Like I'll call you he or she. You call me they, them. That's our day.
I think what I don't get is when people will correct themselves when they misgender like a dog or a cat. They'll like freak out. They're like, "Oh, he's such a good boy. Oh, I'm so sorry. She's such a good dog." It's like you freak out about this animal, but like you won't correct yourself about a human. Like
The greatest way to like circumvent awkward conversations about someone's very personal gender identity journey is just to greet them with your pronouns. And then you're able to just have a conversation that confirms what you're thinking or teaches you what you were wanting to know. And it only takes 5 seconds.
I feel like people are probably asking at home about bathrooms. That's like the topic. Everyone's like, bathrooms? Bathrooms, bathrooms. And it's like, oh my goodness. I go to the bathroom like just a couple of times a day, maybe a few times a day. Like it's not that big of a deal. It's like
not too different from what everybody else.
Wow.
It's crazy.
But it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal.
But I mean, even something as simple as a bathroom, seeing a sign that says, you know, all gender, gender neutral, it does make you feel safer as a non-binary queer identifying person. I definitely prefer those bathrooms because I know I'm going in and coming out, I'm not gonna get looks from moms with their 2-year-old children asking, "Mommy, why is there a boy in the bathroom?" Oh, well, there's not. But thank you for drawing attention to me when I was already self-conscious about it.
Or just in general, I just feel like whenever I go to a public restroom, it's like everyone's thinking, and maybe it's just me being super self-conscious and like, I feel like not everyone's thinking about you, but I'm constantly wondering, is this person questioning like if I should be here or not? That's like what I'm thinking about the entire time I go into a public restroom. That's not gender neutral.
Every time I have to use a men's restroom, it is like beeline to a stall, do the business, and then beeline out, and I don't look at anybody.
Try not to, yeah, you have your blinders out. I'm here to do this and this only.
God forbid I'm wearing like a full face that day.
Yeah.
And there's like people coming in and out, especially on Ball State, which I know like the art building is like an accepting place or whatever, but I don't know, it's still weird to perform outside of a socially acceptable gender and then be forced to like deal with those consequences in such a visceral way as here I am in the male restroom.
Also, there is a not so great way about trying to find out somebody's like gender identity or pronouns. Like we all mentioned, pronouns, just ask, it doesn't hurt. But as far as gender identity, it's a very personal thing, and a lot of people have historically and even presently been harmed for identifying the way they do. So it's also, to put it bluntly, nobody's business to know how you identify. So if if you, for some reason, find yourself questioning whether somebody is cisgender or not, ask yourself, does it really matter? Because we can all assure you it doesn't. I mean, as long as you show the person the same decency and respect as you would everybody else, and you respect their pronouns, you know, that's all you really need to know about anyone.